of some
Of course.
some liquids. We often have liquids at school. I'm sorry, I can imagine. Okay. You can't leave school. Where has she gone? It's not allowed. There are some rules here.
So I'll just continue.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
please. I'm 100% okay.
We were just sensing into our magnetic.
So there is that sensor. Like reacting to magnetic fields, basically, or responding, and the idea that there is input from inside or from outside, this is part of our human delusion of this world, because it's either all inside or all outside, or both perceptions are possible, but the disclusion of like the 5 sensory input, and then which we enabling ourselves to perceive objectively, but then that we're not enabling to perceive objectively, but it's still working, the sensor, so we just interpret it subjectively.
Can you explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old?
5,
He's 6.
6.
I'm just because I'm not following you really.
If
I know you
Yeah,
have
good.
5 senses, the 5 senses,
Yeah.
and then you're talking about other, different things that sense in our bodies.
We
Other
have-
sensory outputs.
we have more than 5 senses,
Okay, that's the point.
and
Thinking could be a sense as well.
so basically there are 2 more sensors.
Okay.
At least 2.
Well, yeah, there are more, but there are 2 major ones that are a whole different type of energy.
Which was the nose and the, this one.
One of them is both.
Yeah.
It's same like we also receive light through the skin, not only through the eye, but it's still sensing light. So we have ability to sense magnetic fields.
Traffic jam.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. I'm over.
Yes. Thank you. Maria.
Stopped in the middle of the road.
Maria. Yeah, she is Maria Arnardóttir. She does gjörningar and all sorts of art and very beautiful.
And because we not have objective acknowledgement of sensing magnetic fields as like something of the outside world, still in the inside we receive everything. So we only interpret it as inside, as something coming from inside, like intuitive knowledge.
You're gonna get a shrink.
And same with the other sensor. The other sensor is the pineal sensor. It is biologically is eye with a pupil and iris and all that. It's in the middle of the brain, and the pupil points up, and it receives also, like these eyes, it receives a certain wavelength of light, a bit longer, like radio waves, but it's the energy it receives, it's not exactly like the light is just a carrier of the input. The actual input is what is coded on the light, because the difference between the pineal sensor to these eyes is it have these crystals inside, silica crystals. They organize in sheets, same material and same organization like a transistor, that can transform an electromagnetic wave to electricity or electromagnetic field, and vice versa. And these exact same types of energies is what we experience
Oh, I missed you so much.
subjectively as feelings and thoughts. That's the idea.
Ooh.
Like, it's very generalizing to say feelings and thoughts, but usually when we say we have intuitive information, so we get it from inner worlds, so it's from the connection for these two sensors, usually, like feelings and thoughts, but it's actually sensors, and we can evolve an objective perception upon them.
The
And then
sensors.
it's more complete. Like the perception of reality is more complete. And the thing is, with each of the 7 sensors,
Grettir minn,
It's,
hættu nú. Já,
receiving
hættu.
input in different dimensionality of motion.
Grettir.
That's why it's
Of motion.
of motion. Yeah.
It's like kinetic sensor or something like this.
No, it's just an expression of dimensional motion in reality, and then we have, because, for example, we receive light through the skin or through the eyes, but light vibrates like photons in string theory. It is even described as a string that vibrates in 6 dimensionality. It's beyond space and time, and it's like photons. In the calculation, they basically move freely between different times and different possibilities. It's kind of part of the puzzle aspect of the quantum theory. Gas move freely in 3 dimensions. That's basically what we are used to imagine, like that's the limit of what we are taught to imagine as reality, like 3-dimensional motion. So there is free motion in all 3 dimensions. Comparing to fluid, it moves freely in 2 dimensions. It doesn't move freely up and down. And it's less matter of how we call the dimensions, it's more about the dimensionality itself. How much dimensionality in the motion. And in the brain there are like parts that interpret input from different dimensionalities, and then we give them names. But the advantage of it is, as more dimensionality, it is more inclusive. It can include input from the sensors that have less dimensional motion, but as less dimensionality, it is more tangible. It's like more the state as it is without changing. So the solid is the most dense state. Solid basically have free motion in 1 dimension. It goes in what we call as gravity or magnetic. I mean, we can perceive it in 3 dimensions. It moves in 3 dimensions, but it by itself, it's basically just move down. Comparing to fluid that will move freely within the glass, it will move freely in all these 2 dimensions. But it cannot go above like a gas. That is just. And
So how many dimensions is fluid? 2, and this would be 1.
the
And then gas
freedom
is
of
3?
motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then plasma moves freely in 4 dimensionality. What we know as the sun is a ball of plasma, or a flame, or thunder.
Is fire?
The flame is
It's plasma.
kind of
Yeah.
yeah.
In 2 states?
It's not pure plasma. It have also gas that goes up there. the sun and electric bzz, when you see that light, this is more pure plasma. The sun is kind of like a thunder ball that stays constant. That is not
You mean
releasing
lightning,
its
yeah?
charge. Yeah,
Lightning.
yeah, a lightning, a constant lightning ball, basically.
How would I understand when they keep saying to me that the solution, some part of the solution lies in a combination of fire and water, so steam? But is there more within that equation? Can that do something for us?
So when you see a flame of when you burn wood, there is gas there.
Yeah.
Steam is water in a gas state.
Yeah.
And shift between states of matter can sometimes skip, like water can even become plasma without being gas, or like I think the dog is bothering you.
Relaxed á þig. Yes, very, very good. And you have relaxed and all is well.
It's just too hot, I'm sorry if I'm not polite.
You just want a tan.
Yeah, he really needs it.
I'm sweating. I'm really sweating.
Yes, yes.
So these two sensors, there is understanding how they work
Wow.
is helping much to know how to use them.
Did you need gold for any example of this?
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't know if I will get to it. The simpler one is the heart, the pacemaker, like the heart sensor, which is receiving plasma fields, basically, or four-dimensional motion. And it's what we interpret as feelings or emotions. Yeah, he's quite
Yes, he is.
distracting.
Loki min, viltu ekki bara fara heim? Loki, fara heim. Fara. Já, off you go. Loki.
Okay.
So, same like the bees also know how to find the hive. They have these magnetite. They follow that, or birds that they know how to go between continents. It's with that magnetite, or marine mammals that, or even penguins. They using it, and we have that as well. We have less evolved interpretation of that expression, like of sensing the planetary magnetic field. We have more evolved sensation of sensing of each organism magnetic field, and this is much as what we experience as how we feel with someone in some time, or how we feel in a certain space, and a feel, it can include sexual attraction, it can include relaxation, it can include being annoyed. It's all frequencies. It's all different wavelength of vibrating off that energy.
But isn't that something that we create within us, like a reaction to something creates the annoyance, or can we actually sometimes pick it up in the field? So let's say if you enter a room where somebody's angry, can you actually pick it up in the field.
So that's the idea. That's the
Oh my god.
Couple of boys just having fun.
That's so sad.
I know.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry.
Loki.
Because most of the books that I've read says that you can totally control it yourself if you react to frequency or not.
so it's not exactly, because first of all, to try to control reality, this is a very seductive trap.
No, well, you control, you can see the anger, but you don't reacting to it is one thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then it's less. It's more about understanding and how it functions, and it's kind of and the part of the thing we're so used to, like usually I use that metaphor, like if I see something, it's not my look, it's something I see. My look is very specific, I can see in the mirror, but there is so much more to see. So when I feel something, it's not my feeling, but we usually say these are my feelings.
But it's a feeling.
Exactly, it's a feeling, it's something that exists in the field.
Even though you are
So
sensing it.
Yeah.
none of it is pertaining to this avatar?
Yeah.
It's like 0.00001%.
Really? Oh my god, okay, that shattered it all.
But that must
Yeah.
mean then.
You lost me there.
So let's say I feel anger, then the person, if it's just in the field, should actually feel the same thing.
He can register that, like, no?
It doesn't mean, well, you feel the presence of anger. You can react in different ways.
Fíla megin, fylgstara megin þetta er.
Well, if you meet a person that is angry and you don't feel the anger, so there is no, like, you're not acknowledging of something that exists.
Oh,
It doesn't mean you have to react in the same
yeah,
way.
yeah. But you can always sense, meaning that you sense it.
Yeah.
Or you can sense it.
True, but
We are sensing it, but we can blind ourselves.
yeah.
It's
Like dismiss, like unconsciously, something like that.
yeah, disassociate, deflect.
Or
Yeah.
choose not to wish to absorb it.
Yes.
Yeah, which is yeah.
Then you're sensing
Or that the sensor is damaged, and there is more difficulty to sense. I mean, like any biological sensor. And it's kind of the heart sensor, and also intuitively in all poetry and like in the I feel in my heart is like it's heartful, like all these unconscious semantic expressions, they're actually pointing towards something that exists. Like we feel with our hearts, literally, like biologically, that it's a sensor that feels. And maybe to say same like light, that we can see different colors and we can see different volume of light. So more volume of light is like it's more feeling, and different colors, it's different types of emotions, like anger, sadness, joy, like sexual attraction, calmness, and then there is the light itself, which is made of the whole spectrum, like the rainbow, and which love as an integrated feeling, because love kind of includes everything in a way. It's all also psychologically, these are all expressions of love. Some say hatred is opposite of love, but you cannot hate if you don't care enough
Yeah.
to or some say fear is opposite of love, but you cannot be afraid also if you don't love something enough for it to be so important that you're afraid it to change. And another opposite of love can be like apathy, just not feeling. But it's actually also can be, it's like dimming the light in order to protect something, to protect myself from acknowledging something. So there is eventually in the basis love of something, at least something. And the conditioning is that love is conditioned to something. When the feeling is deconditioned by any object or subject, like someone else, so it's just a state. And it's basically existing all the time because there's all the time, like this energy is more abundant than air we breathe. It's like there is magnetic energy everywhere. It's just matter of acknowledgement of it. So this is one sensor, like one type of energy that have a four-dimensional free motion. And as well, like in the analytic, in the mathematical aspect, four-dimensional equations would describe in a way the motion of emotion. But there is another component, which is the pineal input, that also weaves the psyche. And the input that is received there is the most dimensional. It is like the 7-dimensional motion from all other senses. And it is what we experience as thoughts or imagination. And basically the energy is information. Like that's the quant. It's even not quant, it's just information.
So, is it getting in formation? It's coming into arranging itself into being
into
something.
a certain form. Because adimensionally there is an absolute singularity. That's how the math points. Because when you go above adimensionality, the zero can be divided by itself. Like the zero as the ultimate singularity is like it cannot be fully singular anymore. There is a distortion in the ratio between singularity and non-singularity. But in adimensionality, it's where it's most it's the most dimensional singularity possible.
Concentrated.
It's like in a way to say what Spinoza mean about God, or like the absolute awareness that is beyond any form, and then it goes into form. So it starts with 7-dimensionality as I move to the other sensor. What we know as thoughts and imagination based on information, and it is a 7-dimensional freedom of motion. So basically everything, not only everything that we can imagine, everything that can be imagined at all exists within 7-dimensionality. All what we can dream, all what we can think, the actual motion that is thought is within 7-dimensionality. Although we can equate and calculate equations of more dimensionality, but still the perception of it is from inside. Because from the perception that what are the minimum amount of dimensions that are needed to have that degree of freedom. So, like Ockham razor principle of philosophy, like to have to cut everything that is not essentially necessary. So the minimum amount of axioms, of dimensions. And dimensionality is the most fundamental also aspect of the psyche to experience something. As Kant kind of concluded that the most basic, I don't know exactly what the word in English, but the most basic things that consciousness is perceiving with is space and time. But that was like 100, maybe 200, I don't know exactly, years ago. So these are two expressions of dimensionality, which is actually the more fundamental. And we can loosen with, especially even if we go to magnetic fields, we can loosen in what we know as space and time and just perceive directly four-dimensionality. Even space-time is an example, like Einstein, but we can even go finer. Einstein did a great start to imagine more dimensionality, but still there are conditionings of inertia of perception. And in a way, the way we think very much influence on the way we interpret our emotions or the energy that is in motion. And it's so our experience of our emotion is not purely just four-dimensional, because there is the way we observe it, which allows much more freedom. I'm curious, are you with me so far? Is it
Yes.
all understood?
I'm curiously with you. I feel I'm right with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, and
Yeah.
is understood so far?
Yes.
Yeah. Also
I
for
see.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm kind of still stuck on is
Yeah.
that none of the emotions are from you. It's all in the field.
No, not none. It's tiny percentage is generated from you. You have influence on the field. Same like your smell have influence on the field. But the majority of the smell that is around is not your smell.
Because we're a blip on the radar, in a sense.
Like a scent.
Yeah.
And usually when you will smell your smell, if it's not like really directly,
Yeah.
it's usually mixed
Yeah.
with what exists in the field. Now this is gas. The plasma is more abundant than gas. There is more. So it's even less. What you influence, it's even less. It's if we were be to sit in a different location with a different energy around, like that type of energy,
Yeah.
would affect the that experience, and like significantly. And the thing is that every organism generates that field as well. Like even bacteria have plasma field around them. This is easy to measure with William Reich was the first guy who brought it to academy. There is technologies that measure these energies. In Vienna, like as a student of Freud that wanted to explore the libido in its physical aspect. today there are more precise devices to measure bioelectromagnetic fields. And every cell in our body have that, every cell in nature. And the air is basically full of bacteria. We don't see, they're tiny, but we are swimming in oceans of bacteria. It's all like,
Yeah.
we're breathing them, like it's all over. If you look in microscope, it's interesting. I mean, yeah.
So as they're working together, our transmitters, I feel like now that if my heart transmitter, that my heart transmitter can disallow my silica to work at its primal, it's like it has to start here for even the allowance of the full optimum receiving
So
peak transmission.
because these two sensors are not acknowledged, our culture is not supporting the evolving of them, and actually many times supporting the suppression of them, like decaying of them. So the norm is that it's not balanced. That's the norm. And that's why in like there is so much like people need to be not trusting others. That's why we cannot like relax into knowing that everyone is love. That's why sexuality is suppressed and repressed even. Like it's all related to that. But yeah, actually the deeper disabling is in that sensor, because this sensor is the most threatening, I think, to the current social structure. And even intended acts by those in governance to harm that sensor. So when we balance this one more, when we use it more, so we also, our system have more of that energy, which is also can be called as vital energy. It is what was called as prana or chi or mana, or like depends in what culture. It is vital energy. Reich called it the organ energy, because every organism have it. And life force, basically. So it's a sensor to life force. Life force is what we feel life is. Like life force is love, essentially. Like this. And many esoterics point to that. But now there is even science to show it biologically and kind of to make it even more tangible. It's not new in its essence, the knowledge. And yeah, we can just listen to our heart and know where life wants to guide. And basically it's also the central sensor of the organism, because in a way, as an organism, we are a sphere of life force. We are a field of life force. Like that's even more than a 3D body. We are actually a 4D field.
So our body is in the field of our energy, or what?
Yeah, it's a sub part of, that's just the more dense part, which is also, every atom is an electromagnetic field.
Yeah.
So it's just more dense vibration of electricity. And of course, as it goes to solid, it is more current that go into very specific expression, less free motion. But it's built from electricity, basically, from like it is a magnetic presence. And it's basically every organism. Every cell have two poles. That's how even the nuclei, that's how the DNA organize itself. The DNA is conductive. And actually all the tissues are conductive. Some more, some less. And they merge together into organ that have its own field, into a body that have its own field, and eventually also the planet, the magnetosphere. It's also a superorganism. This is the planetary life force, which where Tesla directly receive energy, but also the planetary magnetosphere receive a lot of its energy from the sun. The sun is a huge electric ball. So it's like,
Reference.
Can I go pee while we look at the sun?
I don't know, it's a consensus. Everyone is okay with it.
It's recording.
Maybe it can be documented.
Water!
I think the sense of the focus got screwed up after looking at the sun. Oh, okay. Very good.
Crossing frame.
It's amateur documentary, so don't worry. Oh, that was quick.
Did you also pee?
No, I undressed.
I'm putting my clothes on and she's undressing.
Yeah, how are you so...
I'm a little bit cold and I'm usually so hot-blooded, so it's kind of interesting. Interesting.
The energy is mixing, so we are adjusting to each other in sun energy frequencies.
I'm sweating.
You're sweating? Yeah, I know. I'm thinking like, he's from that hot place.
glistens
He's
on your
sweating. He's wearing less. How does this? Okay.
Basically, whenever ask whenever something can have more clarity, just ask. Like
Thank you.
it's also allow me to be more clear in what I bring, because I might not remember later.
Thank you. I feel you. Love, 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 love. Okay, two more students here, very nicely calm. Except one's gonna hump the other in a minute.
Yeah, that's me.
Are the chickens coming now? God, I wouldn't be surprised.
We wait for her or she
Where did she go? To the toilet?
she leaving? Okay.
That's why he's in the car.
Okay, so I think you can continue.
So how do we use them? Like the key is in the perception. First of all, have objective perception. Like not only subjective. Subjective we have anyway, but to develop an objective perception.
Could you give an example of objective and subjective?
Yeah. when we are very, very little, like few months old, maybe to say, we I don't know if you remember, like everything we see, everything we hear, everything we smell there is no distinguishment between me and not me. Like little babies, they look at their hand like, oh, what is that? Like, and especially when the fingers are moving, it's like,
Is this me?
but then,
So this is subjective?
so it's the beginning of learning of object, like to,
So from sub to objective.
yeah, subjective, it's the starting point anyway. Like the ultimate subjective perception is kind of the seed of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But then we learn to develop objective perception, and then we can use the body. I can move now the hand according to will, and it's not just conditioned by whatever, with me not being conscious. I can consciously choose, now I will move my hand up, and I have
Word
this control.
engaged comes to mind. Like
Engage?
you're engaged. When child is not engaged into his body, the hand just moving, he's just whoa, like. And when you are engaged, it's like I can
Operation
move like
engage,
you know.
Yeah, sometimes
my
a
will.
little kid scratching himself with the nails because like few months old, because they have no awareness of even what it does, and then he scratch itself, and he's not aware that he actually scratched itself. It's just like it's all happening in a way. There is not clarity.
So like not fully aware of his senses, like
Yeah,
body senses.
yeah.
So awareness and engagement
It-
is objective.
well, there is awareness, but there is not the interpretation that can define, that can give clarity. But there is a process of, like, information is received and processed, but there is still no objective interpretation.
Yeah.
Because objective and subjective are interpretations. And we learn,
Excuse me, fall in line with
Yeah.
the mind's eye and being just the observer of it all from a different perspective. There's a point of view of the mind's eye where you observe from outside of yourself. Does this fall in line with the subjective and subjective?
it can, to a certain degree, because when we go to that sensor,
Yeah.
the pineal sensor, it's actually is included in that. Like
Okay.
the mind's eye, it's actually, because as long as we can have a differentiation, a distinction between internal experience
Right.
and external, it is not full perception of what is. Because actually there is no. It's like the eye cannot see itself directly.
Right.
The consciousness cannot be conscious to itself directly. And when you go out of yourself and you look at yourself from outside, you are thinking it. You are creating a pattern from that input. But in full awakeness of receiving all the input that is now without interpreting, so there is no, like, there is not that energy invested to create the difference between me and not me. Because there is no definition of me. There is no, it's not necessary.
Right.
We create it in order to be able to communicate, so we can distinguish ourselves as a subject, and then we can meet another person as a subject and have verbal communication, basically.
Grettir, vertu bara kjör. Sérstu.
Ultimately, the use of an ego would be just for verbal communication, like the abstract meaning. It is not necessary beyond that. But it can trap into believing that this is really me and forgetting that it's just a specific light ray breaking from the prism and not the light itself.
Like color of the light.
Yeah, a specific line. Yeah, specific color. Like the me is an idea as well. And all words, and this is our also art as humans. This is our highest ability from all other animals on this planet, is to break down the input from the pineal sensor and to analyze it. So we have language. The most efficient language we have evolved is math, basically. But most people don't think in math or not speaking math. And we have what is called natural languages. They have their own advantages, because just to describe a spoon mathematically, it's so much equations and input, and like we can just say spoon, so it saves a lot of but then we can really believe that spoon is like, because I can call also this a spoon and use it as a spoon, or and what is a spoon, because same with the self. It's like this I remember I heard a Zen master telling that story, that there was a very wise Zen master in China. Maybe you two heard it before. And the king heard about that master, and the king wanted to be, of course, great in everything, also to be the very wise king. So he sent to that master a chariot with horses, like to pick him up to the palace. And then the master came, and they talked about that. Okay, master, like the king said to the master, okay, master, I heard your wisdom is, the rumor of your wisdom is spread all over the kingdom. I invited you because I want to have more wisdom. Maybe you can teach me something. And I don't remember exactly how it goes, but kind of the master says something like, there is nothing to be taught. So the king said, what do you mean? I brought you to teach me wisdom. And the master said, but there is no wisdom. The king, wow. And somehow it goes into that the master said, yeah, but there is no, like, you didn't send me a chariot. So the king said, what do you mean? Come now. And like, he got angry, and they went. The king said, come outside, and I will prove you that there is the chariot. And the Zen master come and say, okay. And they look at the chariot, and the king says, here is the chariot. And the master answers and said, these two horses, they are the chariot? The king said, no. Okay, so can we remove them so I see the chariot? Okay, remove the horses. And then, okay, are these wheels, they are the chariot? No, okay, so can you remove them? So, is the roof, is the part of the chariot, is the, like, eventually there was nothing left. Same with the self. There is no I. It's just all kinds of ideas mixed together. And
Well,
so when you look at yourself, who is the one that looks and who is that self? These are ideas that are defined by distinguishing between them, like creating a difference between them. And like in the Hindu perception, they have this philosophy, like, because they meditate so much. Who am I? Like, that's the ultimate question. Who am I? Like the ultimate exploration. Like, who am I? Like, it can go on and on and on. And eventually everything that you can think of, everything that you can perceive, that you can like just imagine, everything is not you. If you can imagine or perceive or name it or point it, like, this is not you. Because the ultimate self
is this allowed?
is ultimate.
Sunbathing
It's,
in the classroom,
I'm
or it's not the
multitasking.
classroom?
If this is
She's
the
not
Earth
the classroom.
then I think
We're
it's
the
allowed.
classroom. She's
it's a
Everything is
consensus. I
allowed.
don't know. It's
okay.
for you.
Everything is allowed.
Don't photograph, and then she won't exist. She's not there.
She's not there.
not there.
No.
She never was.
She was
no.
not on the camera totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just her wheels
There is
and
no
perhaps
camera,
a horse.
and there are
And
no.
You are jealous?
I am definitely jealous,
Are you inspired or jealous?
potentially inspired. Maybe all of that. But I'm also
You're
very
welcome. There's
content.
space for
I'm
two.
content to observe and to know that her beauty at the end of the day will transfer itself. Thank you. Sorry, detour. Coming back. Returning to clarity and crystal
Class teacher.
class.
So that can be shown as an example of the interaction between a feeling or emotion to the interpretation of it. I mean, every situation can be
Yes.
looked in that way, but it's to perceive objectively. That's why the practice of meditation is so widely encouraged in the esoterics, because this is what allows most to perceive the input from the pineal objectively. This is the biggest challenge. This is an easier one, the heart sensor, because it is 4-dimensional motion. But the pineal input is 7-dimensional freedom of motion. So it can include all the other sensory input. It can include like touch, taste, smell, sound, visual, and feeling. It can include in that. We can imagine all that. And how that sensor works, so it works as a transistor. Transistor is the basic, like the base of the radio technology. Like that's the old beginning of it.
It has to do something with transition, I guess.
Yeah,
Transistor.
it transforms electromagnetic wave to an electromagnetic field, either electricity or magnetic, and vice versa. That's so the antenna is the pupil, and the crystals inside are the actual transformer. And
Can it also translate? Can a transformer transmit a translation to various fields at whatever level you are? Is it so smartly devised that it can operate 3, 4, 5, 6 all dimensions?
the translation is not in the sensor. This is in the associative cortex. It's where the process of interpretation from all the sensors is happening. interpretation of reality is actually translation of the input. And
Mm.
this is changing, this is evolving. And yeah, and we can create more or less dimensional structure of interpretation.
Could be the thought, the translation of senses, uh, sensory input from the environment, like gives energy to senses, and the thought is just a translation of those senses that I can just feel, oh, a thought, and maybe express it, and maybe make art from it, or
Yes.
just
So a thought can be, for example, a thought is built from data, like from information, states of information, and eventually it constructs an idea. An idea is constructed from all kinds of little ideas, sub-ideas, until states of information. And we can get it intuitively. We don't need to go to all the analytical calculation. And just intuitively get it as a thought that is a specific idea that can be either experienced through the other sensors and resonating with that idea that we already have in the memory, or we can experience it in a dream, for example, and then we experience as if with other senses, but it's direct input to the pineal sensor.
Mm. So it goes straight and around memories and emotions and everything. It's just like direct message. Right?
Well, we need a way to interpret it. We need the associative cortex. It's like the crystal of consciousness is the associative cortex, how it's wired. And so input comes, and then what we understand from it depends on how the brain is wired.
Mm.
And there that's what we become conscious of.
Can the wiring of the brain could be called logic?
There is also logic in it, but there is also intuition.
Ah.
Like there is also
So intuition is the function of the brain, you say?
the two hemispheres.
Yeah.
They both interpret the input. One interpret by analyzing, one interpret by intuitively. And the idea is intuitively, it is all in me. I am the absolute awareness that perceives it all. And so intuitively, we can connect to the extra sensors.
Mm-hmm.
But analytically, we're not including them. It's
That's an input.
yeah.
Just saying hi.
It's also the difference between subjective perception is intuitive, objective perception is analytic. It's like it's kind of the same. So
Say that again.
intuitive, it's all in me. It is subjective. It is the ultimate subjective.
Yes.
And we're evolving the ultimate objective.
Yes.
It is always to be evolved too. We never reaching that. We can reach at a certain maximum by ourselves, and then together we evolve more through science and logic, what is called. But we evolve the ultimate objective. That's how, like, the left hemisphere catches up and supports the right hemisphere to be more precise in its intuitive interpretation. They're both needed. Intuition helps you to open to intelligence beyond what your specific logic can perceive, but it's also conditioned by preconceptions. It's structured.
Intuition conditioned
Yes.
with preconception.
Yeah, how you interpret the intuitive.
Imagination.
Same, like for example, Einstein is a great example of someone who broke the intuition of Newton. Like everyone says, or even before that, like the Earth is basically flat. We go and then we reach the ocean, and it's like, but then Galileo or someone before, forgot his name, that actually was killed for that statement. They said no, the Earth, the Earth around the sun, and not the sun around the Earth, or even before that. Yeah. Like it's intuitions we have, and we take them as granted. So the intuition is trapped within that box. The analyzing helps when we go with the logic. We can suddenly understand through the logic that it's not like that. That oh, the Earth is round, or oh, we are around the sun. It makes more sense. Or oh, space is more than three-dimensional, and time is not absolute, and like. So then intuition can be interpreted more accurately. And it is an ongoing process. They support each other.
So questioning or questions can expand logic based on what intuition inputs, like gives as an input.
Questioning,
Plus-
like doubting,
Yeah,
and
like
questioning
is it really like
Exploring,
Is it-
curiosity.
yeah, like why is it
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, that's what evolved the... because I can ask why, and I can receive intuitive knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is also, oh, okay, so I have an idea to hold on to. But questioning that idea that comes and wanting to understand the logic of it evolves the analytic side, the left hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And then the questions I will ask will be also more accurate because the words, like the meaning of words, is at least supposed to be constructed on logic, although slang and stuff, you can say a word which means different than what person really understands.
That's why language of science and mathematics is the best way to communicate.
Or
Because-
telepathy, indeed,
Yeah,
because that fuses all of it together.
So math would be also telepathically most efficient. It's like as a language to define a meaning. Because also telepathy, you can send a telepathic message, you can send it intuitively, or you can, when you are aware on that nuance, because okay, you experience it somehow and you transmit it in that way. You don't know really how the other person receives it. So when you go into these nuances, you can be more also aware of how it is received. Because there is a range of possibilities. And yeah, telepathy is one of the functions of that sensor. Everything that is possible with transistor technology, which is, I think the internet is the most inclusive, like,
So because now I'm seeing a radio frequency of a rainbow spectrum in front of me. So we're at a stage of evolution where we're having to be very multi-linguistic transmitters across this bridge. So perhaps there's an intermediary stage where I, as a transmitter, I see what frequency is most receptive through all of that being or that field, and I try and choose a transmission through the frequency of indigo as opposed to yellow, gold. You know, is there a little time on Earth where we're able to just transmit so that it comes through in the most significant and clear logistic way.
As more we spend time together, we learn each other mental language better, and then we can send more accurate message. So that's why people that have deep connection, it's more clear between them. But also the influence of like the heart connection, like the heart sensor, is kind of keeping the channel more open. Because telepathic input can include also feeling. And the feeling is kind of a field that is many times what chooses if to keep it unconscious or to bring it to conscious. So you know more the feeling frequency to go through.
And it radiates potentially more allowance in like it's a pre-opening to may I transmit to you. So you open up that whole field as a are we may I, and then you started allowing for trust in the field, for compassion and all that the lotus brings. Maybe
Well, ultimately we are all sovereign beings, so we don't have to be open to receive all the data from every, like it's flooding.
Right. So you send a kind of like a pre-signature from the heart. It's like that knock, heart to heart.
The internet is just a great example to parallel it too, because you can send someone a message, and this someone can be in a different continent, but it receives a certain information from you. You can send it as a text, you can send it as an audio or as a video. Still, just hearing and visual are the sense, and ideas, like these three senses can be moved through. Also, we actually do also influence the feelings, but the smell and taste and physical touch is not so much can be sent in internet technology, but it's basically on the same idea. You can send a message which can be more or less inclusive of other sensors input. You can even for example, you can watch a movie, for example, when you dream, not a lucid dream, let's say, not like a dream that you are active in, but you just observe a movie. But you can also play a video game, a dream that you have choices, and you can go to Wikipedia or YouTube. You can learn information, like channeling or like connecting to whoever or whatever you call it, and receive information. These are some basic applications of that sensor, and it's the same technology like the internet. So it's that comparing to this sensor, which is a different applications are coming from it. So this sensor is not sensing beyond continent, unless it's using the pineal as an ally to remote perception. But it's sensing the field here, like it's more the presence. So I can sense there is someone there. I can sense where you are at within your like field of feelings. I can, and again, it's all. That's the thing. It all can be allied with the pineal, but it by itself, it can be used for healing because it's life force. it can be used to communicate with animals and plants and like feeling those frequencies actually crystals like silica crystals which are in the pineal, it's exactly like transparent crystals, like the regular crystals. It's the same material. No. And with our thoughts, we can, in a way, influence some nuances in a crystal.
Yoga.
For example, when there were CDs, all technology, now we have it in microchips, but we can like burn information into the CD, into that crystal, thin crystal layer, silica. It's focused light, basically, in a specific frequency, in a specific coding on the light. That's the thing, is it receives light, but it's the coding of the information on the light. This is the actual input here. That is why it is more dimensional than just light, because it adds the sequence. And we can influence crystals with our thoughts, basically. And we can do it also. It's the most abundant mineral on the surface of the planet, and there is a huge crystal in the mountain, like a huge one. So we don't need to actually like go, we can influence that. And of course each one of us is just one brain in the whole planetary web of consciousness. But it's another input. These crystals can hold so much information, and they are holding so much information. It's like what is known as the Akashic records. It is where space in a way bends in a fifth dimension, but crystallized in that form. Science got to there is a scientist, Rupert something, he talks about the morphic field.
Sheldrake.
Yeah, it's interesting concept that kind of resonate with the fifth dimensional experience, but bringing it with like, these are the laws, it works, and that's how it combined with the quantum and biology, because biology brings so much more complexity. Is a field that remembers the information, basically.
Morphogenetic field.
It's like, for example, if they take a DNA and they put it somewhere in a vacuum place, and they conduct through that electricity, then they take away the DNA from there. The space itself still holds the coding of the DNA. It's like in the curvature of space itself it exists.
I don't know is it from the same guy, but like if we stay in one place for a while and you go away, they can still measure the photons like of the structure.
For how long?
For very long.
Wow.
So the idea it is actually stays forever. And what happens, we just move in space. So it is every time is actually somewhere, because the galaxy moves really fast. We're never in the same place. So it's all. because space and time are interpretation of dimensionality, but the dimensionality itself, that's the act, it's more fundamental. But basically, these two sensors are what we are when we receive intuition, like, or we connect to channel information or to gut feeling. It's like it's all related to these sensors, and the distinguishment between them two allows more clarity of the input and the understanding that it is two sensors, so we can have more objective perception upon it and understand that it is not my feeling or my idea or my thought. It is
Received from the field.
yeah, it just exists. And you can be an antenna for it or not. And anyone else can be.
So it eliminates ownership, censorship, all areas of putting that copyright stamp on anything.
All ships,
Ship.
but not goats.
Where, what, how does pride serve this avatar? The pride of an author
My
finding
idea.
his
My
own, her
fun.
own. Does it have a? Is it of value at some point in our evolution?
So this, let's say, avatar, like the organism, is basically a four-dimensional form. It's like a life force field. That's why it's an organism. It's like alive, and it is first of all the basic coding that are embedded in, like, wired from, like, in the womb already in the brain, the patterns of survival. It's first of all designed to survive. That's how it can sustain. And then through that, like, in a way to say, through the human avatar, it's maybe the most efficient avatar on this planet for ascension of awareness into perception of self that is more dimensional, that is beyond this, like all the way to the absolute self, like until one knows itself as the absolute. And it's a paradox in a way, because how can one know itself as the absolute? Because it's still as, and there is still someone that knows something, but towards that direction. And that's can be as well, at least in the analytic side, graduated by the dimensionality of perception of self. And still, to build a building, you need the first floor. So you need to survive. And